Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. This is Michael Goldberg, and welcome to the LinkedIn Live Lunch Hour. Today is Tuesday, June the 2nd. Happy birthday to my lovely niece, Allison, and I hope you're enjoying your day. So here we are with a gentleman who I was introduced with just through connecting, and his name is Michael Glatts. Michael is the founder of 901 Innovation. And Michael, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Great to be here.
It's great to have you as a guest. And we're going to be talking about some interesting things today. We're talking about design thinking and how you use design thinking to help innovate, especially when you're trying to come up with different strategic initiatives. Whether it's coming out of COVID or you're seeking a job or just in everyday business and how you do things. So, Michael, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and what you and 901 Innovation does?
So I guess my story is best to cover the last 26 years. I was in corporate, worked for Pfizer, learned a lot of things, including design thinking, and hit a milestone a year and a half ago and decided, you know what? I had a great run. I raised my kids, achieved what I wanted to achieve, and now I want to apply this and have a little bit of fun in life. So for me, it's all about solving problems and applying innovative methodologies like design thinking to do that. And 901 Innovation gives me a chance to help other people have fun by unleashing their innovative mindset.
Absolutely. So let's talk. Let's start off with the basics here. Let's start off with, why don't you tell everybody what design thinking is, and let's kind of walk through maybe an example of that.
So design thinking is a human-centric process that's basically focused on really the user and finding the unmet need. It's very popular. Actually, in the West Coast, Steve Jobs used it at Apple and gave it a lot of notoriety with a company called IDEO and others. Stanford's very big into this. But basically, it's just that. It's really immersing into the human experience to see if you can find out what it looks like from their lens, and if you're missing anything or if there's an unmet need you can solve. And then ideating and coming up with really cool solutions to excite and delight your audience.
So give us an example of that. So what, I kind of know what it, I get it. So but for those who may not be familiar with it, but let me ask you, before you go in there, let me ask you this. I mean, don't you think a lot of people are practicing design thinking without even really knowing they're practicing design thinking?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was introduced to the methodology and the terms back in, I want to say 2014. And when I kind of chuckled because I said, wow, this is just how I'm wired. I always thought this way. So it just came naturally to me. So yes, I believe people are wired this way. Yeah, folks that really like puzzles and problem solving, even detectives and things like that, I think really have the design thinking mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we went live, I think I told you that we used to do this all the time in recruiting at several of all the organizations I've worked at. Really looking at, what's working well, what needs to be improved, and where do we want to make these changes, right?
Yeah.
So you use design thinking, especially around strategic planning. So let's say I'm new to this. Maybe I'm in a job search. Let's start with that as an example. I'm in a job search.
Okay.
What suggestions would you have to for the job seekers that are watching this, how they would implement design thinking from a high level standpoint?
That's a great question, Michael. I think there's two approaches. One, as an individual that's on a job search, do you have the ability to really reflect and do some self-empathy with yourself and get down to what is it you truly are trying to address in your job search? Are you just looking to pay bills, or is there something more that you're trying to tap into? And if you can uncover that, there's the need you want to focus on, and then you simply apply that to positions that will fulfill that need. Conversely, if you think about potential employers you're working with, it's the same thing. It's okay, I read the job posting, but if you can really get into and do some empathy with the people that are hiring, what is beyond what's written on the job posting that they truly need? Do they need someone that's going to be a fresh voice in the organization? That may not come through on something that's posted on LinkedIn or anywhere. But once you talk to them, you realize, wow, they really need this. And then the question is, can you provide that? And then if you can, you want to present that in such a way to really call it out.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, especially in a job search, I could definitely, I think what you want to do is, and these are things that I do to coach my clients, is, the biggest flaw that people, when they're kind of planning out their job search strategy, there's only one thing, and that one thing is go apply to jobs. Well, that's not really design thinking, right? Design thinking is, who are your target companies? If something's not working, if your engagement when you're reaching out to people isn't working, let's say you're reaching out to them via email or in-mail or another text or however you are doing it, and it's just not you're not getting a response back. Design thinking, if I understand you correctly, would be you're tracking what's working and what's not working. So this isn't working.
Yep.
So then you have to make the change. But then I think where some people get stuck, and maybe you can help. So if I'm sending out networking engagement emails and in-mails, I'm not getting people to respond. Walk us through what you would coach somebody on in their thinking. I know what I would do, but this isn't about me, it's about you today. So walk me through how you might coach that person in a design thinking one-on-one strategy to change that up.
All right, if you're putting a lot out there and it's not working, the first is the obvious. It's not working. And you have to acknowledge that and accept that. And then ask the question, why isn't it working? And keep asking why as you go down the path. Because ultimately, why it's not working is the audience you're sending it to is just not reacting to it. And it's not eliciting any type of emotional response from them. So that's fine. It's actually good because now you know what's not working. Now the question is, how do you pivot and how do you iterate into things that are working? And one way, if it's possible, if you can get people on the phone and get some candid conversation and just ask them some simple questions, what, if anything, did you like about what I sent you? And what might you change? And that, do you have any ideas for me? And then you iterate that and you test it with a new group of people. And you'll quickly see what people are responding to. And then you build on that and you focus on that. And that's part of the design thinking process.
I appreciate that. So one of the sites as a part of the research here I was focusing on was the Interaction Design Foundation. I believe they're UK type, well, they're a nonprofit, I do know that, but the reason why I can tell that they're UK is they spell empathize with an S. They talk about empathizing, defining the problem, ideating to come up with possible solutions, setting up a prototype, and then testing that out. What are your thoughts on those 5 steps? Do you follow those 5 steps? Is there a certain formula when you're doing design thinking? If so, can you expand on some of those 5 processes we just talked about?
That is a very common formula, formula for many that follow design thinking. There's a few slight variations, but for me, you hit it. It starts with empathy. I run workshops where success starts with empathy, and I will focus just on that because it's so powerful. If you can really understand the audience you're ultimately trying to delight, you'll find unmet needs. And that's the key to really cool. So then you put it through the process. Define is basically defining that unmet need or defining their point of view. Ideating is then coming up with the crazy ideas that you haven't tried before. Prototyping is an inexpensive way to test those ideas without going and investing, building, revealing the curtain, and having it flop. And we've got history of those things happening. And then finally, testing and iterating until you've got something really cool that's happening.
So in the prototype phase, I think it's good because I think that can also help us anticipate potential issues that pop up, whether it's in user design or process flow design. So I like that point about saving, could be thousands to hundreds of thousands to even more in saving dollars, right? So am I right there? Is that correct?
It's so true. We love to say build it and they will come, but what if you build it and they don't?
Have you run into that issue before where you've seen that happen?
Oh yeah.
So how do you handle that? Do you go back to the drawing board and go back to empathize, or is it all right? No, we know. So we've tested the prototype. It didn't work out. So now, what would you go from there? If it's where would you go from there?
Well, your goal there, if it is a prototype, then you haven't invested a ton of time and resources. So where you go from there is you obsess over the people that you put that prototype in front of, and you build off of what they liked. If they're not liking anything, then you have to keep on putting ideas out there until you find that. But in all likelihood, there's going to be aspects of a prototype that they say, wow, I really like that. Boom. That's a keeper. Then there's going to be those where people are making faces. For instance, if you put them in front of a computer and you're trying to roll out a new website or something, and you just watch people, and if they, lean in, they start an inquisitive face, what they're saying is they don't understand whatever they're looking at, and you've got to explore that, and you have to change that, and that's all part of the iterative process in the prototype.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen that happen many a times where you go in and like talking about we were building a career website at one of my former companies. And one of the first things we did is we knew we had to change it, and we had to kind of bring it into the 2015 arena, 2014 arena.
Yeah.
And so we brought in a focus group, but we also brought in external clients, which were candidates that were never hired yet. What did they like about the website, the career site? Did they feel they were getting enough information? Was it easy to apply for a position? Were there too many clicks? Those are the kind of things. So I like that idea that you talk about where you're bringing in a group of people. And I think a focus group, and I would assume a focus group is probably the easiest place to start when you're coming up with something. Is that correct?
Yes. However, I'll take it a little deeper.
Please.
Instead of a focus group where you might be behind a two-way mirror, and I've been part of those and I've watched them go down in flames. If you go out into the environment in which that person is going to interface with this, go into their home, go into their office, wherever it is, and see how they're interacting, because that's the world they're going to be in with the distractions and everything else that's playing out. So that is the ideal way to really understand how somebody's going to react to what you have.
So in terms of when you, like, if I were to come to your organization and say, all right, I need help with X. Can you walk me through like where you've really been successful in helping a client without mentioning their name and going into too many specifics? Can you kind of walk me through a specific example um, of how you of how you went through the process with them and how you helped them?
Yes. Again, the most success comes when you can start with empathy, start with some of their customers. Recently worked on a project for a good friend of mine that owns a financial services company, and he's a very innovative financial guy. He's bringing kind of the mindset of think like a bank, but don't just rely on a bank and get a couple percentage points. Be that. And he was really struggling to find his messaging out to people because he knows this world so incredibly well. He just wants to share it with everybody. But in talking with the people that really love working with him, it wasn't so much about his knowledge. That was a given. It was about his commitment to them, their need to really provide for their families, and all the distractions and all the things they don't know. And it was simply him curtailing his messaging to potential new customers to make it about that. Because once the journey starts, they'll get a taste of his depth of knowledge and wisdom. But initially, that wasn't the need. So he was able to uncover the fresh need, and now he's going after that and doing very well.
And I think you bring up a good point. Is sometimes we get very, very close to processes and our way of thinking, whether we're subject matter experts or we're new to the industry.
Yeah.
Right. How do you? I think it's so important to bring others in because you can be paralyzed by what you're trying to figure out because you're so close to it. So is it better for a person like the client you were describing, for that person to step away and let a project team go, assign a project team to go and figure out the issues and then come back to this project, the project leader, project champion with ideas, and then have him or her not pick it apart, but to provide feedback to make sure that they're on the right track? Should somebody step away that's really too close to it, step away, in your opinion?
Absolutely. And it's one of my favorite topics in this whole space. I'm not saying they step away and hand it off by any means. But what I found, especially when I really started picking up momentum with the use of design thinking back at Pfizer, is where we often failed is we would go to teams that, as you said, were too close to it. They had solutions in mind that they could not step away from. And I'm not saying those solutions might not have worked, but it was blocking new ideas and opportunities from coming in. So what I like to do is take a challenge sponsor and really articulate and explore their vision and their challenge. Pull them away from it for a little bit and bring in as much diversity and as many people that have no emotional tie to this as possible, and let them come up with some really cool, amazing ideas. Then bring it back to the challenge sponsor and their whole team, who are the challenge owners, and now build it with them. And they'll start to bring in some of the issues that might be specific to their industry or their corporation or whatever it is. And that will help the iterative process. But yeah, diversity gets so many cool ideas.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think you mentioned even when before we went live that you've even worked with students on design thinking. Talk to me about that. Like, what are you? Yeah, tell me what you're doing there.
Back in it was in September of 2015, I went into my favorite school in Philadelphia, which is Mercy CTE, Career and Technical High School in an underserved community. And this is a group of administrators and teachers that do some really amazing things with a very limited budget. And we went in and we worked with sophomore business students. I worked with two of the teachers named Mary and Lori. I said, hey, what if we did a design thinking project with your kids? I've had a long relationship with the school. They used to come and visit us at Pfizer. And they were like, yeah, let's do this. We went in and we let the kids pick a topic as long as it was something that would have a positive impact on the city of Philadelphia. And they came up with a lot of very heavy topics, and they voted on making an impact on homelessness. And what we saw with the kids was, because they were empowered, they really stepped up and they pushed the boundaries and the envelope of trying different ways from their world to help make an impact on the homeless situation. And conversely, what happened, because they were empowered and because they were so engaged, it helped them achieve what the teachers needed to achieve in that business class. Learning how to present, learning how to articulate your ideas, learning how to use tools like Excel and PowerPoint. So it all came together, and that one event was one of the major catalysts that drove me to walk away from a 26-year career in corporate to go and do more of this. This stuff is just so much more fun.
Well, plus, yeah, that's a fantastic story. And I also think that, when you have kids, especially at that high school level,
yeah,
they're not to be negative, but they're not tainted with the work world yet. So their ideas are more fresh.
Sure.
And clear. So let's kind of head down that path a little more. So why does that happen? How do we free our minds? I mean, not to get philosophical, but how do we free our minds from this, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of mentality, to, oh my God, the world is our oyster and we have so much that we can do around XYZ process. How do we train our minds to get out of that type of thinking?
There's probably a lot of ways to tackle it. I love to go after this using improvisation. I've been doing improv for, almost 30 years, and I've got some crazy friends from the New York community that help me out with this. And if you just stop and look back and think of yourself as a young child, always asking, why? To the point where the no's start coming, and then you get into school and the rigors of school and the processes, and then you get into bureaucratic systems, and we beat it out of ourselves. We just beat ourselves down where it's no longer worth those bold, fresh ideas because they're silly or they have a negative connotation. So for me, how do you get out of that? Improvisation is a chance to just be free and do things in a controlled setting that allow you to come up with and say whatever comes onto your mind. And then I tie that back to the innovative spirit and the innovative mindset. And that's what you need. And the beauty is you can come up with wild, crazy ideas. They may not be feasible, but the process will filter them into feasible, desirable, and realistic. So you have to go through it. But if you don't bring them, you're not going to have them.
Yeah, and I think that, to your point, I think companies, at least in my experience, they're, especially like whether you're blue chip companies or your less innovative companies, they're going to be less open to that type of improv.
Yes.
And I think that, so if you're in a job search and innovation and bringing new ideas and fresh ideas to the organization is somebody you want to be a part of in terms of a company, then you need to be asking the right questions to ensure you're coming to an organization that will allow you to be an improv, whether it's, well, mainly this is for the job, I assume. Do you do improv for comedy or do you do improv period? Like just
Um,
improv?
no, I do it for comedy, just for fun in life. But I've applied it into the design thinking and the innovation work that I do as well. I go in and do sessions, and I'll weave in real improv games, and people love it.
Where
They love
people are
it.
throwing a word out or something like that?
Yeah, and it's not saying that, hey, now you have to be this in your organization. No, in a period of time, it's giving everybody freedom to fully improvise and show themselves that they still have that within their mind to just go wild and crazy and come up with whatever is there. Now, once you start using that in the right way, then you apply the other methodologies, and suddenly you find that, wow, you know what? I can come up with some really cool, groundbreaking ideas. And there are ways to test and bring them to life to see if they even work.
And to me, that's the biggest and most important part is trying it
Yeah.
because, and it's interesting when you were saying what's feasible, what's forgot you mentioned you had three adjectives there, in terms of is it feasible, is it are we are you
Desirable is one of them.
desirable, are you able to deliver it versus focusing on, well, what's not going to work. And I think way too many people start with that, and I would assume that in design thinking that's not the place to start.
No. Yeah, especially when you're ideating. There are periods where you do come in tighter, which is where you can start applying the filters to see if things are realistic. But when you're just trying to ideate, you absolutely have to have that mindset. And then that's the same mindset of improvisation. If you throw two people on a stage and you give them a suggestion, and they're coworkers, and the first guy establishes that they're coworkers as firefighters, and then the next guy denies that, the whole thing is just shut down. You have to build off of that, and you have to let it go wherever it goes.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so let's maybe do a little let's do a little design thinking. I hear sirens. You are from Philadelphia.
I am.
Philadelphia is one of the hot spots
It is.
for the riots and the peaceful demonstrations that are going on.
Yeah.
And it just, at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they had already started
Yeah.
yesterday. And I'm sure it sounds like, I mean, I don't know if that's an ambulance or what have you, but things are probably happening. So until so we know what the situation is. So how do we take design thinking and try to improve race relations between police and African Americans, really towards everybody? What are some of the things that you would start off with? What would you suggest to our president, if that's what he is? What would you, if you had the floor, and you could say, this is what we're going to do? How, without going into, if you don't want to go with specifics, you don't. But let's kind of walk through this and have like a little ideation session. So, what are some of the? How would this start out?
It would start with what you just articulated. Design thinking begins with a nice, juicy challenge. And sadly, this is one that I don't think any of us want, but it is a challenge that we're faced with. So you need to align on what exactly that challenge is. So for instance, with all that's going on right now, you hit on one, which could be improving relations between police and the community. That could be one aspect of what is unfolding around us right now. We could easily come up with dozens of kind of big challenges related to this. Once you have that, then you have to identify who all the players are. Who is it that is either the challenge owner, who are the audience, for lack of a better word, that you're really trying to delight. So that could be the community. That could be young individuals that are, in this situation, it could be young Blacks that feel persecuted by police. And we have to do a better job of immersing into their world and really understanding what it looks like from their viewpoint. Conversely, you have to immerse and really understand what it looks like from a police officer's viewpoint. And then anybody else you want to bring in. It could be the mayor of a city. It could be a community leader. It could be a company that's trying to employ people in that city. But
People of color, right?
Could be anybody, but you have to really look and be in their shoes and say, what's this situation look like from your lens? And what is it that you need out of this? Once you have that, now you've got that juicy overarching challenge into tighter, more specific challenges. And that's where you start to ideate. Say, okay, how do we address that? You're uncovering the layers, and then each layer, you have to ideate, come up with ideas, take those ideas back to the people, test it with them, and see if it's making the change. This is not an easy process. This is one that, quite frankly, will never end because time keeps introducing new elements. But if we ever want to take on something like we're facing right now, design thinking is absolutely an incredible way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at a problem that really stemmed, 230, 240 years ago.
Yep.
We're going back to the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
Right. Where people were brought over, and the blacks were brought over as slaves, and then the Civil War brought everything to a rise. Of course, I would never suggest that war be the answer to try to solve that problem, or war be the situation to solve what's going on today. But I like, so some of the things, and even the small things. So, the New York City police chief, joining the protest. I saw last night on the news the sheriff in Flint, Michigan, who is just full of energy and decided to stand up and do the right thing and led the march and made all the other police officers participate in the march. It's those small steps that if we could do things like that would lead to, but the problem is that I guess we forget, and then some idiot goes off and hurts another person, regardless of color, like that. A policeman not doing their job the way they were taught to do their job. And in fact, my opinion would start with training. And I'm sure that they would tell me, that they have training. They go through race training and profiling, and you're not supposed to do that. Yet you have these idiots that decide they're going to wield their power by becoming a police person. An officer of the law. And I think that's where deeper personality profiles need to be done. I think, and not only just filling out an online assessment, but you're going to be asked some pretty brutal questions by an industrial psychologist that's going to help you figure out whether or not this person's the right fit to become an officer. I think there's a lot we can do, and I appreciate you allowing me to ask that question. I agree with you, unfortunately, that it's going to take a lot of people being open-minded and being fair and respecting others. It's the things that we were taught to do through the Ten Commandments, through our Bible studies and Sunday schools, that this is why we are who we are and what we do. And I get it. There's only a selected percentage of these folks out there, but it just, what if we did a better job identifying those people before you made them, you put a badge on their chest? And I think that's probably where you're going to start. And I know it's a touchy subject, but any other thoughts on that before we kind of move on?
Well, I think if you go back to the story I told about the kids taking on homelessness, when they chose that, I reached out to my connections in the design thinking community who helped train me on this. And I got a lot of polite, like, wow, that's pretty ambitious. And we went ahead with it anyway, because we weren't going to solve the homeless problem in Philadelphia. We were going to help these students make an impact in any way they could. So for instance, one of the teams of students came up with an idea of doing a makeover day in a woman's shelter in Philadelphia. And they brought their fellow students from the cosmetology class to do that. Did that solve homelessness? No. But did it make an impact on those women and their children in that shelter? Absolutely. And did it show the students that incremental things like that can help? Yes. So we are not a patient species. And we want instant gratification. But if you're going to take on things like this to change the world, you really have to remove the burden of time and instantaneous gratification. And you just have to start somewhere and build momentum.
Yeah, especially when you have 200 plus years of these issues.
So
Right?
in a way, we've had to be patient because it's gone on for 200 plus years.
Yeah, but why is it taking so long to solve that? Why not? Look, I'm all for world peace and everybody getting along. And I had talked to a friend of mine who was born in China, raised in Canada, but she said she worked in Shanghai and said that they were that racism is everywhere. Maybe, here it's whites versus blacks or whites versus Hispanics, but in Asia it's very interesting. She's from China, so the Chinese look at the country of India and the people from there lower down on the kind of beneath them, as well as other Asian countries as well. And it's interesting that it doesn't go on here that much, but you don't see people taking it to this kind of extreme in those countries. But maybe it's because of China. You're not going to hear about those things. But how do we, how do you take 200 years and try to solve for X? I guess that's the major question that you and I probably aren't going to be able to answer on this call.
I wish we could.
I wish we could too. So it's really sad. So you had mentioned design thinking influencers. Who are some of those influencers besides yourself? Who are some of those influencers that you kind of turn to and work with as a part of your business? And
from a global perspective, the Hasso-Plattner Institute is really dynamic in this space.
What's it called again?
Hasso-Plattner. So Hasso-Plattner is one of the founders of SAP, and he's a big supporter of design thinking, and he's created the Hasso-Plattner Institute, and they bring design thinking. They're located all around the world. A lot of their headquarters are in Potsdam, Germany, but they're pretty much on every continent and every major country. Also here in the United States, there's a lot of design thinking activity out on the West Coast, Silicon Valley. Stanford has the design school. The company IDEO I had mentioned, it started with David and Tom Kelly brothers, and they really did a lot. They also started the D School, which was funded by Hasso-Plattner at Stanford. And a lot of schools are offering courses and things in design thinking. So there's a lot of information online about the process that you can really pick up. And, I think what you find is for some people, again, you're just wired that way. So it's easy to start practicing the methodologies with some proven tools. For others that are more solution oriented It takes a little bit of time, but when they see some of the incredible things that can come out of this process, they're in because they want really great solutions. And I'm talking about solutions that are at the very far end of the bell curve. The reason the bell curve exists is because, most things are in the middle there. But there are oftentimes in this world, those ideas that are like, wow, where did that come from? And that's what a lot of people want. And for those that do, I profess that design thinking is a great way to get there.
Are there certifications, like if someone wanted to go get certified in design thinking, does the Hasoplatz have?
Yeah, Hazel-Plattner. You could go to Stanford. They have the D School, and if your organization's behind you, they might be able to put you through there and get certified. So yeah, there's probably.
Sure,
I've heard of other universities that were offering certifications, things like that.
So, are there careers in design thinking for people, or is it mostly independent consultants?
Now, there are careers, there are companies, they're more in the design work of tangible products, but a company like IDEO is basically all about design thinking. So there's careers there. There's companies, throughout New York. There's some great people at a company called the Design Gym in New York. Frog is another one. They start to get into consultancy for sure. And then there's some organizations that have embraced this. IBM has a huge design thinking contingency and people that are running it. Procter & Gamble absolutely turned things around at in the early 2000s by embracing design thinking. So it's there. It's a term that's ironically around a lot. It's an odd term, but for those that know it and embrace it, you can find some pretty cool things happening.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to explore and see. I think that folks in human resources and talent acquisition, and I would imagine that a lot of the folks that would be in the organization or change management space, that design thinking would be something that they'd probably want to get in their tool belt so that they could deliver for the companies or their future companies when they get back to work.
Yeah.
So this is great. So, well, Michael, how do people get in touch with you?
They can easiest is find me on LinkedIn.
Right.
Go to my website. I'm always willing to chat and share ideas, especially during the COVID pause. It's given me more time to do such things. But for me, innovation is a journey. So if people want to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share ideas and see whatever they have on their mind.
Do you have any big any events that you want to promote? Anything that you have coming up that people could continue their learning with you through design thinking?
Again, thanks to COVID, it's more virtual, but I will toss one thing out there. I'm doing this for free. I created something I call Vimprov, which is basically 35 to 45 minutes of virtual improv. And I offer it. It's perfect for teams of like 8 to 12 people that are working virtually on WebEx or Zooms. They need a laugh and they need a little bit of hope. They need a break from reality.
Right.
It's a way for me to introduce myself to organizations, but for them, it's just a break from all the craziness that's going on and give them a little bit of laughter.
And so when's that going to be?
So I offer that one by one. So if anybody's interested in hearing more about that, they can just email me and I can chat with them.
Perfect. And so what's your website? How do people see your website?
901innovation.com.
901innovation.com. All right, I'll put that up on the banner here.
Cool.
So people can see it. So guys and everybody, thanks for joining us. This has been a fantastic conversation. Michael, appreciate you sharing something that I really didn't know too much about until we connected. So I'm super excited to hear more about this, discuss some touchy subjects, and but also just the whole concept around it. And I want everybody to follow Michael Glatts. It's funny, I would say follow MG, but people would be confused because you have, or both of our initials are MG. It's just you're AMAG, I'm MMG. I can't thank you enough for being a part of this show, and look forward to learning more and doing more research. I'm actually interested in getting certified in this, so we may have to talk offline here. So if you could just stay on for a minute after we end the broadcast, Michael. To everybody out there, I want you to be safe. I want you to stay home. I want you to obey the curfew. That's a new one to add, which unbelievably I can't believe I'm saying. Obey the curfews, stay home, stay safe. If you have to go out, wear a mask. Don't infect everybody. We're already seeing major cases go up here in Dallas since we've opened up the state, and now it'll be interesting to see what happens after everything goes on with the different peaceful and not so peaceful demonstrations going on here. So thank you again, Michael. Enjoyed talking with you, and we will see you everybody tomorrow on Job Seeker Journeys. If you're a job seeker, you definitely want to be tuned into here. I've got a couple of great guests that are joining, and we will learn about their experiences. And until next week, thanks for tuning in to LinkedIn Live Lunch Hour with Michael Goldberg.
Thank you, Michael.